everyone, and welcome to episode 21 of What to Think. My name is Dylan Tweeney. I'm here with Rich Riley. Rich is a reporter on the news team at VentureBeat, covering all kinds of things, advertising technology, security, the shenanigans of John McAfee. And today we'll be talking to Tim Draper. He's the founding partner of a leading venture capital firm, two leading venture capital firms, Draper Associates and Draper Fisher Jurvetson. He's also an outspoken proponent of Bitcoin, a controversial plan to split California into 6 states, and many other things. But first, we've got some tech news highlights from VentureBeat.com here. Without further ado, our 3 interesting stories from the last week. First of all, I want to talk about a story that a freelancer, Fletcher Babb, did for us about how drug deals on Instagram go undetected. Now, Fletcher has been covering this. He wrote about it for Vice last year and wrote about it again for VentureBeat in the past week. It's become clear, he writes, that a large and active drug trade has emerged on Instagram. With a quick hashtag search, you can find almost anything you want. Pills, herbs, powders, you name it. After that story broke last year, Instagram blocked a handful of these specific hashtags, but there are literally thousands of street names for drugs, and you can still find them on Instagram through this. The pros use a variety of tools while conducting their business in public, including Ubuntu laptops running Android emulators, so they can run Instagram, which is ostensibly mobile only. They can run it on a laptop via a VPN, hiding their tracks and avoiding detection. Of course, they use Bitcoin for their transactions, and we'll be hearing more about Bitcoin later on today when we talk to Tim Draper. It appears that Instagram has done little to shut down this trade other than to warn users not to do anything illegal in their terms of service. Rich, you covered a similar story earlier this year about gun sales on Facebook, which is the owner of Instagram now. So what's the deal? Do they take the rule of law seriously?
Instagram and Facebook?
Yeah, exactly.
Or the feds? I mean,
no,
it's
I mean
a good question
the
for
company.
both of them.
I think the company. Like, how come they're not cracking down on this? Do they feel any responsibility to police illegal behavior on their site?
I think that the model for this would be the street drug dealer. Cops, how they tend to do these investigations is when there's they notice a spike or a trend of people gathering on a certain street corner, they throw assets at that. And then it's
more cops.
Yeah, assets, exactly. Yeah. More people, more uniforms, more plain clothes, whatever. And it's the same thing with Instagram and Facebook and in other social media platforms. I was at a conversation one time with Mark Zuckerberg. He was talking about when he started Facebook, he never envisioned spending so much of his time dealing with law enforcement requests. So the question or the answer to the question here is, yeah, they have assets, they have technical assets that they're able to look for this stuff for, but it's constantly moving. So it's like the proverbial needle in the haystack for them.
I will say that, when you covered the advertisement of guns for sale on Facebook earlier this year, Rich, after a series of stories in VentureBeat that got picked up by lots of other national media, Facebook eventually did respond. They clarified their procedures. They appear to be working very closely with a variety of organizations, including the New York Attorney General's office, who we spoke with last week. So there may be more going on behind the scenes that we just haven't heard about, but we'll continue to dig into it. Moving on to our next story. A lot of the buzz about the iPhone 6 before it came out about a week ago was that it would have a sapphire screen. Now, sapphire is a very hard mineral, much harder than glass, and the hope was that this material would make iPhone 6 screens even harder and more scratch resistant than the Gorilla Glass that the company has been using for several years. But the announcement came and went. The phones are coming out. There was no mention of sapphire glass. They're just using regular, it's actually an improved version of Gorilla Glass. They're calling it ion strengthened glass. We have learned from talking to analysts that checked with the supply chain that, in fact, Apple's first choice was sapphire glass. They were looking into it, but there were some problems. It wasn't working right. It was breaking too easily during drop tests, so they abandoned sapphire for the iPhone 6.
Yeah, it kept testing. It kept cracking. So,
Yeah.
and that happened repeatedly. And my colleague, Mark Sullivan, has done a hell of a job really getting to the bottom of this. And so the bottom line was it wouldn't do what Apple required it to do, and so they looked elsewhere.
So are you really bummed out? Were you looking forward to the sapphire glass on the iPhone 6, Rich?
I haven't slept since.
All right. Well, you can console yourself. When it comes out in 2015, the Apple Watch will have a sapphire face, and we are pretty sure that sapphire will be coming to the iPhone 6 eventually, once they iron out those kinks.
Doesn't Corning produce their glass, Apple's glass?
The
initially?
Gorilla Glass, yes.
Yeah, the Gorilla
Corning,
Glass.
Yeah, that's made in Kentucky, actually.
There's a neat passage in Jobs' book, Isaacson's book on Jobs, about dealing with Corning and calling him, the Jobs calling the CEO up in New York, and that CEO thinking it was a joke.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, it's a 100-year-old company, something like that.
Yeah,
and I think it really made it much more high-tech and much more relevant than it was.
Right, and Jobs told him what he needed, when he needed it, and why he needed it. And then, like, within a month, they said, within that conversation, we can't do it. And then a month later, they came up with the glass that, adorned the first generation of iPhones.
Yeah, it's a great story.
It is.
Let's move on to another gadget. This is the Muse headband from a company called Interaxon. Devendra Hardawar on the VentureBeat team reviewed it recently. It is a headband that goes, it sort of looks like, he calls it a futuristic crown that royalty might wear, 100 years in the future. It goes on your head, around your head, and it's got little EEG sensors that measure your brainwaves, and it interacts wirelessly with an app on your phone, so that you can learn to calm down and get yourself into a more mindful, meditative state, Rich.
Yep.
I can't think of anybody on the VentureBeat staff who would benefit from this. Just offhand, Devendra does say that after using the Muse for a few weeks, he felt calmer. He was able to approach problems with a more focused mind, and that it was really awesome. Unfortunately, it cost $300. You could probably take some mindfulness meditation classes for significantly less than that.
Yeah. Well, people needed the pet rock, right? So, is that the direction?
But did the pet rock help you achieve enlightenment, Rich?
It communicated on its own level. We'll see about this, though. I mean, $300. Stranger things have happened. But the fact that Dev, somebody I respect, my colleague, is saying that he gained more clarity after using it is definitely worth pursuing.
Well, there's a huge amount of interest in mindfulness. It was only a matter of time before a gadget came out that could help you be more mindful. So you know what? I'm not going to knock it until I try it. I would like to try it out.
Definitely not, and I think he raised the CEO and founder Ariel Garten with the $300,000 on Indiegogo to start that initially.
It started as a crowdfunded project. That's right.
Hats off to him.
Yeah. Before we go to our guest, I want to offer a moment of thanks to our host and sponsor, New Relic, a software analytics company that makes sense of billions of pieces of data from millions of web and mobile apps. Right now, New Relic is offering listeners to VentureBeat's What to Think podcast a special discount to its upcoming conference called FutureStack 14. That's happening in San Francisco on October 8th and 9th. FutureStack is your chance to join more than 1,000 technologists, developers, sysadmins, DevOps people, IT managers, entrepreneurs, and futurists. Learn how they're doing great things with software and data and get the insider's view on how they're doing it. To sign up, just go to newrelic.com or futurestack.io. And the first 25 people to register using the promo code VentureBeat will get 50% off beta tickets. We'll see you there. Now I'd like to welcome our guest for this week. We're very pleased to introduce Tim Draper. He's a founding partner of two venture capital firms, Draper Associates and Draper Fisher Jurvetson. He's one of the original people to come up with the idea of viral marketing and web-based email, which led to the success of Hotmail, Yahoo, Gmail, and many others. His successes also include Skype, which we're actually using to talk with him today, Overture, Baidu, Tesla. I'm going to skip a couple from the official bio here, Twitch TV most recently, and hundreds of others. And Mr. Draper is also the founder of bizworld.org, which is a nonprofit for children to learn entrepreneurship, Draper University of Heroes, a school for entrepreneurs from 18 to 28 years old. And he leads 6 Californias, which is an initiative to, quote, improve the governance of California, end quote. So thank you for joining us, Mr. Draper.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on your show.
I think I got to kick this off with a question about 6 Californias, which you've been in the news for quite a bit recently. The Secretary of State, I guess, or the Election Commission said that it did not qualify for the ballot in 2016. So what's next?
Oh, yeah. Well, we're still working with them. We're going to be doing our own count and making sure that they were accurate in their decision. We submitted about 1.2 million signatures And we're very confident that at least 808,000 of those are good signatures. So we're going to, in effect, do some extra counting of the signatures they threw out and figure out why they threw them out and whether they were actually good signatures.
How many do you need to qualify to get on the ballot?
808,000.
Okay.
And this is for the ballot of 2016. So there are really 2 years and 4 months to get this put together and on the ballot. So this is a real blow if their count is accurate. But it's just another example of why California is operating as though it was in the 1940s. In order to get a signature, we need people to sign a 14 by 17 sheet of paper with certain fonts, and it has to be handwritten. It's a system that is so far gone. I mean, the idea that we don't accept digital signatures for this kind of a petition is sort of ludicrous.
And that's one of the things you're trying to get at with this, right? That if
it's the whole point is that we've allowed our government to slide. We've all been too complacent. It is an old government living in an old world when California used to be really shining brightly. Let me give you a little bit of a feel. 45 years ago, California was #1 in education, and now in K-12 education. Now we are 47th out of 50 states in K-12 education. We used to be #1 as the best place to do business in the United States, and now we are number 50 as the worst place to do business in the United States. In that 45 years, we have quadrupled the number of prisoners we have in California. Our infrastructure is falling apart. We have problems with water, problems with traffic, all of these problems because infrastructure spending has gone from 40 years ago when it was 26% of our budget to now 3% of our budget. We have a real problem. We have, in effect, a monopoly provider that provides whatever service they feel they need to or as high a price as they can justify. And with 6 Californias, we're going to have 6 states that all have a fresh look at governance, and we will have a choice. We can choose which state works best for us.
So despite all those problems, and I won't dispute the numbers, we might find that we disagree on the causes, but I'll stipulate the numbers. But, despite those problems, we still have, one of the most vibrant tech ecosystems in Silicon Valley, one of the most powerful aerospace industries in Southern California, one of the biggest agriculture industries in the Central Valley, right? So it's not completely broken, is it?
So let me stop you right there, because in Silicon Valley, we started Tesla, but where did they put all their jobs? They put them into Nevada.
Yeah, the Gigafactory.
In L.A., we started the movie industry. We had the movie industry had hegemony in California, and now Sony's just moved 2,500 jobs, and Disney's just moved 2,500 jobs to Louisiana. And you talked about the oil business. Occidental Petroleum just moved 8,000 jobs to Texas from California, including their headquarters. People are leaving this state, and they're leaving because they are not getting the kind of services that they want. And we have very high unemployment. Sure, we have a great tech industry. We're sort of resting on our laurels, but the global Silicon Valley is now almost as big as Silicon Valley itself in new technologies coming from other places. So we might actually even lose the center of technology over time, and it might go to China or Singapore or Estonia or one of these places that has a government that is really encouraging technology.
Tim, let me jump in here real quick. This is Richard. The endemic problems that you're citing, I mean, some would argue there's a vagueness to it, and that it sounds like the problems that we have here in California mirror the other 49 states. Is there a state that sticks out in your mind who's doing it right in the Republic, or is it a purely California issue that's so dysfunctional that you've focused your attention and your assets on?
I mean, California really is the worst run state in the entire union and has been for a long time. And it's not because of any one person. It's not because of one governor or another or one senator or another or any of that. We've had very good people representing us. it's so big that individually we are not well represented, and the government is operating a little bit in a vacuum because they know they can't satisfy all 38 million of us. So they're just sort of saying, well, I think we need a bag law, or I think we need a law for big gulps, or we need a law for one thing or another. And they're operating in a place not realizing that basically we got high unemployment, we got a lot of prisoners, we got high recidivism, we got bad education. So they're not recognizing that. Are there other states that are doing a better job? Yeah. Massachusetts is doing beautifully in education. Possibly the best run government is Texas, in that they have their representatives meet only for 2 months every 2 years, so that during the rest of that time, they have to go live under their laws in the part of Texas that they live in, so that they're not there all the time. Our representatives live in Sacramento, breathe Sacramento, and they are there all the time, and they are very far away from us, so that we feel very disconnected with our representatives, and they feel disconnected with us, and they're just doing the best they can, but they've got all of these other interests to balance. They've got 38 million other interests to balance. And if you ever try to get something done with 2 people or 3 people, it's usually pretty easy. But if you get something done with 40 people, it's harder. And in California, we got 38 million of us. So the idea of trying to get some important law passed or important regulation to happen or important incentive to create, it won't happen because there are too many diverse interests. So,
well, then the question is, why stop at 6? I mean, you might as well have 12 or 100 or 38 million Californians, right?
Well, it's interesting. Actually, we did think very hard about 8. 8 would have actually been easier in some ways, in that certain groups would feel like they were at least identifying with the other people they were with.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. Down in what would be South California, the way they look at immigration law is, hey, build a bigger wall. And the people who in Silicon Valley, the way we look at immigration law is, we need more immigrants.
Right.
Because the immigrants generally are better educated than the people that have gone through California education.
That's right.
So, Tim, but I mean, here's 2 things. One is you could be accused, some could stand you of accusing you of balkanizing, attempting to balkanize California. And secondly, address this if you would, so kindly.
So define balkanize. I'm not familiar with that term.
Breaking it up, and in what you're proposing, 6 states being able to choose your entity. It sounds like the former Yugoslavia. Muslims here, Christians here.
But we're already, all 6 of these states are a big melting pot already.
I know, and that's the problem. I think that you may be facing in an entrenched fashion is the resistance of the diversity itself, right? In terms of the decision-making process in Sacramento, for example, because there is so much diversity here. California is noted. There's a constant and continual influx of new, not only refugees and immigrants, but people from other parts of the United States. So you have perhaps the most diverse state in the nation. So, I mean, maybe there is pushback on your initiative because of the very diversity that you've addressed in your equation. Do you think?
But all 6 of these states will be incredibly diverse in any case, because people have come from all over the world to come to California. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we're going to have very diverse states, and that's a terrific value. And it's really powerful. What's not powerful is a government that is completely detached from its people. And that's what happens when you're trying to do too much for too many people. You can't please them all. We all have very differing views on various things. I mean, I think way up north in Jefferson, they'll want to legalize marijuana. In some parts of the place, they'll want to have gay marriage, and in other places they wouldn't.
Yeah.
Those jobs that went to Nevada from Tesla almost certainly would have ended up in Central California if Central California had self-governed. There's no way that California was looking out for the best interest of Central Californians when they decided to go ahead and let that Tesla factory go.
Okay.
And however, they were looking out for the best interest of all Californians. And so what may have been better for all Californians was not as good for the people of Central California. And there's huge unemployment in Central California. They would have loved to have a Tesla plant put in Fresno.
I want to cue into something that you said a little bit earlier about how Silicon Valley might lose its edge at some point. There was an interesting Q&A with another investor from Benchmark, Bill Gurley, in the Wall Street Journal a few days ago, where he talked about how he's very concerned that the burn rate is incredibly high at many startups, and that sort of implicit in his discussion is this notion that valuations are kind of not connected to anything. Real estate expenses are super high. People are getting too greedy. We might be about to see the bubble kind of deflate a bit. Do you agree with that view? Do you think startups are spending too much? Are investors getting too greedy?
Sounds like he just finished raising a fund.
Hey, he's trying to scare off the rest of you?
I think Silicon Valley is going through yet another cycle, and I think we've got 2 or 3 more good years in the cycle. Everything's going to be looked at like, all our problems will be glossed over, and hey, our economy's good, and what are you worrying about? Why bother to change anything? We should leave it the way it is. But boy, if it comes down after that, which it always does, we might have real problems. I mean, if you thought California was broke a year or 2 ago, just wait until the economy of Silicon Valley goes through another bubble.
Well, it's not a question of whether, it's a question of when, right? Because, the nature of the beast is to be cyclical, correct?
Yeah, it usually is.
Right.
Because people do pile on and then they pull back, and they do it as a group.
Has that changed your investment thesis of late at all?
I'm a little bit more careful with seed investing right now than I was before. But I think we in the venture capital business just have to stay in the game because, in fact, Google was funded at the top of the market. So there are going to be great wins all the way through. And Draper Associates and Draper Fisher Jurvetson, we really feel that investing through the cycle up and down is really the way to go because the creativity continues whether you have a high or a low NASDAQ.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question from an associate who I think you worked with maybe at South by Southwest or something, Brad King, who asked that in the past you've said that you fund people, not ideas, and he passed along a question. He'd like to hear you discuss how you figure out what that skill set is, and what part of startup culture is it that teaches people, how to be good. Good entrepreneurs, and how do you identify those people, and how do you make more of them, I guess, is what the question is.
Yeah, what's the formula, Tim?
It's clear that I will fund people because they are the ones who are going to implement whatever the business ends up being. Ideas don't do it for me because an idea is just a thought, and hey, this is interesting. Anyone can have an idea and just sort of lay it out there, but it has to be someone who's put a market and technology vision together and has decided to make it their life mission to do something very disruptive that may not be very popular at one time or another. And here I look to people, and the way I make those determinations is, I'll give you a little secret, I ask, why are you doing this? And I do it with sort of a shrug of my shoulders, like, what are you doing this for? And I'm looking for the reaction. If somebody is just throwing out an idea is, oh, I want to make money, or I just thought it was a good idea, or whatever. But if it's somebody who's really going to dedicate their life to it, it bursts out of their heart and it sparkles their eyes. And you will see the room around you light up. And I think that is where they say, because everyone's doing it wrong, or because we have this opportunity that will come once in a lifetime, or it's because I worked for this company and I kept telling them that this was the problem and they wouldn't listen to me. it's those kinds of things that come out of their hearts, and then you know that you're kind of onto something, and at least you know that the entrepreneur in their heart is going to do whatever they can to make it successful. Now, it isn't true that I only invest based on people. I only invest in people, but
they might have a terrible idea, right?
I look very carefully at market size. So I do a lot of market sizing. And then technological change. In fact, a couple of my biggest investments were because I identified a big change of some sort happening. One was peer-to-peer technology, where I looked at Napster and Kazaa, and I saw what they were doing with file sharing, and I knew that going after the music industry at that time was not good, but that technology was capable of other great things. And so I followed and asked what these guys, after they closed down Kazaa, I asked them what they were going to do next, and that's how we ended up working with Skype. The same kind of thing happened where I saw, I got a ride in an electric car, and this was like put together with duct tape, and the guy showed me how incredibly fast you could accelerate and how quickly you could stop an electric car. And I realized that you don't have to make a huge sacrifice to own an electric car. In fact, it may be more fun to drive. And at that point, the line started, I said to myself, these lines are going to cross. At some point, we're going to have electric cars that are better in every way than gas-powered cars. And that's why we funded Tesla. So I am looking for market technology trends that are going through rapid change. And then I mean, the way we ended up getting funding Baidu was that we knew search engines were a big thing here, and we knew China was opening up in some way, but there was a big chance that the Chinese government would just, would not really open up. And so we took a bit of a risk there, but we did see the opening up of China, and we counted on the wisdom of the Chinese government. And so we were able to fund Baidu, and that ended up being a big success for us too.
Okay.
And several others in China, of course.
I'd like to ask you about Bitcoin, and maybe just real quickly. You're very, very bullish on Bitcoin at a time when the price has gone down quite a bit from its high, and other people seem to be getting quite skeptical about this form of currency.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a long-term investor, and I looked at Bitcoin and I said, based on my calculation, 3 years from now, it's a $10,000 Bitcoin. That was
per Bitcoin, 10K.
10,000 per Bitcoin.
Wow.
Yeah, there are a lot of reasons for that. Here's what's happening. Right now, there's a lull because there was a lot of excitement behind Bitcoin. People said, hey, this is the way all currency is going to go. This is a great way to store value. This is an exciting way to move money across borders. It's much cheaper than using a credit card. You can use Bitcoin, and the transfer of goods and services can go without paying Visa or MasterCard 2.5% to 5%. We saw that, and we were all excited about it. Then Bitcoin goes into a lull because it hasn't all happened yet.
Well, and there have been serious security issues and several major problems, right?
Yeah, but the security, I mean, it's weird. The big security issue didn't really give Bitcoin much of a drop in price at all. But now all those businesses, that whole ecosystem that's being built around Bitcoin, 500 businesses that I know of are being built around Bitcoin. Those are all in process, and products are being developed that can completely transform commerce and finance the way the internet transformed information and communication. And so I'm looking and I'm saying, wow, as soon as those companies come to fruition, we're going to be able to do all the things we imagine doing with Bitcoin and more. And Bitcoins themselves are going to be more valuable. And I think the value to society is going to be incredibly huge, because the best societies are the ones where money moves the fastest.
Okay.
And societies grow economically where they have some sort of an advantage, where money's moving very quickly or information travels very quickly or whatever. Well, the U.S. was able to take advantage of the fact that information was going to travel quickly because the internet started in the U.S. Well, Bitcoin is pretty much up for grabs. All the countries of the world are going to probably start clamoring for being the leaders in Bitcoin,
right?
If they know what they're doing. And this is going to create a global expansion of Bitcoin. If I'm in Argentina and I know that my own currency is going to devalue by 25% a year, or now it's like 50% a year, I don't want to hold on to that currency. So I'd much rather hold on to Bitcoin, something that's actually appreciated in value. And then if I have a family in Mexico or in Philippines where I need to send money, I send money and 8% of it goes to Western Union. I can easily send that in Bitcoin. And it's a much more efficient way to move money from one country to another. The various countries, the various governments are starting to wake up and say, oh, if we encourage Bitcoin, or if we have a light touch here, we're going to get all those entrepreneurs that are building their businesses. Our countrymen are going to be early users of Bitcoin, and we're going to benefit from all of that. And I know Korea has been very advanced in this way.
Okay.
And they were very early in virtual currencies because they had them in their massively multiplayer games. And now the Korean government is saying, yeah, we want Bitcoin here. And so we now have made 2 Korean investments in Bitcoin, CoinPlug and Corbit. And the same things are going to happen in other countries where they're going to start recognizing that this is a great way to move money faster in our country, and our country is going to be wealthier as a result.
Okay, so for you, it's not just a business bet in the rise of value of Bitcoin, but you see a whole global ecosystem, whole global finance system growing out of this. That's a pretty impressive vision.
Oh, absolutely! It's going to be very exciting to see it evolve.
Well, Tim, we're unfortunately out of time. There's so many other things I could ask you about and would love to hear your perspective on. We may have to get you back on another episode of this podcast in the future. But thank you very much for spending some time with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.
Take care, Tim.
Well, that's another episode of What to Think, VentureBeat's Technology News Podcast. Thanks to our host and sponsor, New Relic. And thanks to you for joining us for this episode. You can find us online, of course, at VentureBeat.com. I'm Dylan Tweeney.
And I'm Richard Riley.
Catch you next week.